Alright, for my next trick, I will be rebuilding or resealing, depending on how you want to look at it, the gear case off my 15 horsepower outboard. Now, everything else I sandblasted. This I didn't, just because of the parts involved and the difficulty of doing that. And that's something I really wanted to go through, so I'll be rebuilding it, sanding it down, and painting it, and hoping for the best. I have a plan for a future video where I do sandblast it, remove all the bearings and gears and everything, and completely go through one of those. So until that time, this is going to be a simple reseal. Now, one problem that this lower unit has is the propeller shaft. Keep a watch on the outer ring here. See it bounce up and down? So it's got a bent propeller shaft on it. Now, is that a big deal? Probably not. But when you've taken apart, 3 engines to make a good one, you have a plentiful amount of extra parts. So I'm going to be swapping that propeller shaft. Alright, well, let's get started. Alright, I just got done draining the oil. So, first things first, let's go ahead and get this O-ring off here. And get the water pump off. And the water pump just slides off. I'm going to put all the parts I remove into my little gold pan, aka pie tin. That's it for the water pump, really. Let's get the drive shaft out. So, not too bad. Splines look good. A little bit of rust forming around there, but we work with it. I'll clean it up. Shift rod's got to come off. Shift rod's out. Not too bad. I'll remove the connector, clean that up, and clean up the rod later. Let's get the drive shaft back out again. Now we remove the propeller hardware and our 2 little screws holding that on. Now, let's take it over to the gear case holding fixture. Now, in a previous video, I showed you about this tool. So we're going to install that. The propeller nut on. Using a 13/16 wrench. Tighten her down. Gear case cut. Started to come off here, so we're on a good sign. I'm going to get some washers and stack them up on our puller bolts. Rather than washers, I'm just going to use some 5/16 nuts. That'll give me a little more spacing here, in theory. Looks like we bottomed out again on the prop nut, but it's nearly off. Well, a little more than a 1/4 inch up or so. Well, should be able to get it off from this point. Like a glove, huh? Now to get the reverse gear out, we're going to do the old flip down and jiggle method. Came right on out of there. Now to get the prop shaft out, you need to use the old yank it method. I don't like it. Good chance you're going to lose the detent balls and or spring, but that's how you get them out of there. So I have the spring and 1 ball. The ball, I don't know where it's at, probably down inside the gear case somewhere. Now I'm going to use the tilt and jiggle method to get the loose parts out. Yeah, my detent ball just rolled away. Let me go find it. Aha! Now I'll go ahead and remove the pivot pin. This one looks pretty stripped, so probably been taken apart before. It even looks like that's going to be a struggle. It's a little on the strip side. It's probably got another use left in it. I'll check out one of the other engines, the part engines, see if I can't replace it with a better one. That's what I got for now. A little dark, but with the pivot pin out, I can now get out the clutch dog shifter, cradle shifter, and all the other related parts. Anyway, just so you know, see these little grooves, little lines? When you reinstall it, those need to go back in that way. Reason being, you have these greater little tapers. That helps you guide in your detent balls. At least that's the theory behind it. I don't see it being easy on this one, given the opposite position of the teeth. But we'll see how it goes. Here's the old tilt and jiggle approach. That ain't working. Oh wait, yeah it is. Pinions out, as is the thrust washer. Alright, looks like all the parts are just kind of sitting in there now. And there goes the bearing. That's probably got to get changed now. Nah, looks okay. Aside from some seals and some bearings, this gear case is pretty empty now. A few weeks ago I made a video showing you how to properly remove the shift rod bushing. The problem with doing it that way, well granted it's the right way to do it, but you need the slide hammer. Not many things use this slide hammer. You can get away with it in a lot of instances, so it's not something you need. And the cost of it, $70. This guy's like, I don't know, 15 or so. So this, pretty affordable. This, not so much. So I'm going to try something a little different. Going to ditch the slide hammer and use a little removal tool. Going to use a threaded rod with two little nuts back to back on each other and tighten down so I can use this to hold it. Two fender washers, my puller bridge, and another nut. And I'm going to see if I can't pull it out rather than hammering it out. Alright, just so you know where I'm putting this tool, there's a small hole right inside of there. That's where that tool is going to be going. So, we got that out of the way. Alright, I have the tool resting inside a little hole. I'm going to put my puller bridge that I used for the gear case, put that on there. My two fender washers, I did this just for extra strength. My holding end and my puller nut. Slide it through the hole. I'm going to line this down into the shift rod hole rather. And then I'm going to hold up the tool's backside and thread the rod into the tool. So now when I move the tool, this moves and it feels like I'm bottom down into the tool. So that's a good place for that. Go ahead and move our nut down a little. And now I'm going to pull the handle out of the tool. By handle, I mean this thing. That unscrews. And that leaves the head of it inside of there, ready to come out. Alright. Fit my wrench over the top here. Couple of turns. I'm going to hold the top with this one. And we'll kind of see what happens. Suddenly got looser, so let's hope it's coming out. May have just stripped off my nut, and that's what's happening because I don't really feel it doing much. Yep, that's exactly what happened. Well, experiment failed, I think, just as I predicted. But let's try it again using a bigger nut. More surface area might do the trick. Alright, now the rod's just bending. I'm gonna go ahead and say you're not pulling that thing out of there. It feels like if I go anymore, it's gonna snap off here. The reason I don't want to do that, I don't want to risk getting my tool stuck in there. But either way, you're gonna need the slide hammer. Yeah, it's bending the washers. Strip the rod. Yep, sorry guys. I think you're gonna need the slide hammer for this. Tools installed, slide hammers installed, so let's get this thing off here. Well, as annoying and as hard as that is, it worked. Alright, now Now it is time to pull the upper seal out, or the drive shaft seal. For this I will be using an Evinrude 2-jaw puller, which is this guy, and a thread adapter for the slide hammer. There's other ways to get this out, but I figured I'm already using the slide hammer. Might as well show you what are the right ways to do it. Evinrude's got 2 ways to do this. What they call a puller bridge, and this way, the slide hammer. Both ways I'm sure are fine, but I'll be doing the slide hammer first. Let me go ahead and do this right. So you don't want to put this in too far because there's a bearing inside of there. We only want to pull the seals out. There's 2 seals back to back inside of here, and well, let me show you. You can use the little foot of the jaw there as a feeler. So right about there I can feel it hit the bearing inside, but grab the top lip of the seal. So that's kind of where we're after. So when I put it in there, that's what I'm doing. This is a medium jaw puller, so it's kind of hard to get it into the bearing. But if you had one of the small jaw pullers, it'd be pretty easy to get it all the way in there. So something to keep in mind. Now again, this is the thread adapter on here to use with the small slide hammer. I don't have a big one. I use the small one. Wrong way there, but I want to make sure that's nice and tight. Install your slide hammer. And there are our seals. A little ring from where our steel stayed put. That's pretty much it. We can see the top bearing now. This one looks pretty clean and nice, so shouldn't have any issues there. Just so you know how they came out. Now that I showed you how to pull it out using the proper Evinrude tool, I'll show you how to pull it out using this tool. This is a blind hole pulling set, or excuse me, blind hole bearing puller set. The unique thing about this set is the size it goes down to. It goes down to, I believe, 6 millimeters. So it's handy for pulling out a lot of small seals that we deal with in the outboards. I'll probably never use any of these, but they're there in case I need them. So my only real complaint here is the setup process. It's not entirely easy. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So that one fits in the hole pretty nicely. This guy, too wide. So this is going to be our tool we're going to use. Need to get this rod out. It needs to go in this way. I find it easier just to take the rod fully out of there and then flip it around. Now I'm going to get some wrenches on this side and this side to tighten it down. We're getting about close here. Again, you can go into the bearing, but you don't want to do that. So I have it just before the seals now. What happens when you tighten this down, that little pin expands these little jaws. Same thing as the other puller I showed you. Only this has 3 jaws, kind of. Looks like we're good right about there. I think I've reached the end of the expanding capacity. Hopefully this doesn't give me any problems. I haven't before, but now that I'm trying to make a video of it, probably won't work at all. So I position the feet of the thing right there on the end of the horns, and what I'm going to do is get a big wrench, use it to tighten down this top nut. Now, sometimes you may need to get a smaller nut wrench to hold the top of it, but I don't know if I necessarily will. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing with my arm in the way. I don't know if you can tell the difference now, but that seal is on its way out. And we have our double seal. And that's what the inside looks like without it. So, if you don't have the right tools, removing these seals ain't always that easy. With not necessarily even the right tools, but some tools that kind of work like this is a lot easier. So anyway, I'll spend the next few minutes here getting the tool put away. And there's our seals, same as the drive shaft. 2 seals back to back, or front to front. Alright, now it's time to talk about parts, tools, and supplies. There's 2 ways to get these parts. Buy the Evinrude Johnson kit, or you can buy the Sierra/other aftermarket kit. Now, if you remember, we pulled out 2 seals out of the drive shaft and 2 seals out of the bearing carrier or prop shaft carrier or whatever this thing is that you want to call it. The newer design, which is what you would get with the Johnson Evinrude kit, well, when you get a Johnson Evinrude kit, you can get the newest design of it. The newest design still has 2 drive shaft seals, so they go back to back just as the original ones did, but we only have 1 big prop shaft seal. So if you buy a Sierra kit, you'll get 2 back-to-back seals. Problem with back-to-back seals is you need the original seal installer tool to install it. That does not work with the new prop shaft seal, in which case you need the new prop shaft seal. So if you're like me and you don't mind spending a little bit of money on the seal installer tools, great. If not, you're going to use the socket. This may not really apply to you. I have the seal installer tools. I'm going to use them, but fair warning, if you buy yourself an Evinrude kit, you're going to need the new installer tool. If you buy a Sierra kit, you're going to need the old installer tool. So let's get rid of that. Well, let me show you, actually. Here are the old seals. They install back to back on that sealer perfectly, and that'll easily press it in. Or if you don't have a press, get a hammer and just kind of tap it in. This guy, all kinds of little grooves inside of there. That seal fits on there absolutely perfectly as well. So, clean out all the mating surfaces. And probably go get some fine sandpaper, clean out that a little bit better. I got to pull the old O-ring off. Now I'll get the wire wheel and clean up that surface a little bit. Alright, got the faces cleaned up a little bit, little groove cleaned out, and I cleaned the inside of our seal surface. So might as well put the O-ring back on right now before I lose it. So we're going to need some gasket sealing compound now. This goes on the edges of our seal. Now, I've been wearing gloves, so I've been too lazy to put them on. You know, once you get started working on something, you don't kind of excited about it. But anywho, so all we got to do is rub it around our seal, where our seal will fit into our bearing carrier there. And we'll install that onto our tool. Take our tool over to our arbor press. Let me see if I can't get you a better view of what I'm doing. Seal and tool install like so. And you just push them down. As you can see, that was incredibly easy. But you can hammer them in if you want. So to install the upper drive shaft seals, we're going to use the new design tool, 326554. Little tricky how to use this. You have the flat side of the washer. This goes in. So you're going to install that side first. Make sense? See the flat of the tool? Yeah. Then you have an indent there on this side of the tool. So you flip the tool around, put it on there, and force it in that way. Get it? Good. So lip surfaces need to be coated in the gasket sealing compound. No reason to show you me doing that again. So I'll do that, and then I'll go press these seals in. Now the top. So I went ahead and cleaned up the shift rod bushing. Just took some steel wool to it. So for this, we need to apply OM's gasket sealing compound to the outside and some triple guard grease to the inside of the O-ring. Usually I don't touch this stuff with my hands because it's gross and sticky, and it really works though, let me tell you. But hands are dirty enough, so whatever. Alright, that should do it for our greasing, hopefully. Kind of force that in there like so. Put a little more grease in there just for safe measure. Now, probably going to fall out when I put the tool in it. The O-ring, I mean, but we'll see what happens. Oh, by the way, we need a installer tool now. But probably guessed that when I was putting it on here, huh? Alright, O-ring is crammed inside of there. Little plastic washer, on like so. And I'll clean the grease off the outside. And put some triple guard grease in there. Not triple guard grease. Gasket sealing compound. The reason I think they want to do this is not necessarily an extra layer of protection, but to make sure it doesn't seize itself in there. That's my guess. Alright, so that's ready to reinstall. So with my parts on the end of the installer tool, we just feed it down inside of there, back in the little hole it came out of. That is it. So you can use this as a feeler now. Get inside of there, make sure it's down all the way, which in my case it's not. It came out so easy, figured it'd go right back in easy, right? Alright, well it's flush in there now, so I think we're okay. And we got our drive shaft seals installed and our shift rod seal installed now. Alright, so before I start putting everything back together, I'm going to clean up all the mating surfaces. Now, this isn't a gasket surface, but I still want it clean just because. I'll wire wheel the inside here and run a tap down each screw hole. Do the same thing to the pivot pin screw hole as well as the drain plug holes and the top water pump. Now, to make life easy when I do my run my tap down, I'm going to use the set of the tap sockets. These just kind of fit in there and allow you to use the socket instead of the stupid tap handle it comes with. And also between each hole, I'll be oiling the end of the tap and wiping it down with an old toothbrush. Alright, our drain screws here still have the original little seal in there, so those got to come out. As does the O-ring on the pivot pin. Now we're going to start putting everything back together. To do that, we need to make no dry assemblies. So I have some 80-90 gear oil here. Putting some in an old, I don't know, paint can or lubricant spray cup or whatever this thing is. I got a little in there so I can dip parts in. First thing to do is put the bearing back inside of the bearing cup, which is right down in here. So we'll dip that in oil first. Nice and lubed up. And then hopefully my screwdriver trick will work. But got it in like so with the old screwdriver. Now our clutch dog needs to get installed a certain way. The grooves that you can see on the teeth of the clutch dog here, they need to be facing the forward gear. So this is going to be our backside. Now inside of here you'll see these little indents right down there. Those are where our D10 balls need to go. So we need to install the propeller shaft in like so. So what I'm going to do is put a Sharpie mark right there and right there. And that'll tell me where the detent ball grooves are. If you can see them. See them right there? And right there. Now here's the old propeller shaft, the slightly bent one, and here's our replacement. So we'll put them side by side just to make sure they are identical. Same part number, but you never know. Yep, they look identical. So we'll get rid of the old one, install the new. Now we need to get our forward gear assembly kind of made. So in case you got confused over which gear was which, forward gear goes on the front of the propeller shaft. It's kind of loose, kind of sloppy. This gear, nice, clean fit, perfect fit. That's our forward gear. You can also tell by the depth there. So anyway, this is going to get installed into our gear case. It's going to go in like so, with the forward gear right there. Make sense? So to do that, make life easy on us, we need a tool. This is the shift rod locator tool, or shift locator tool, detent locator tool, I don't know what it's called. But anyway, so this will screw into here and that'll allow us to pull this up. So let's install our shift locator. It'll go through the shift rod bushing. Then you'll see the cable coming down through there. And we'll find something to reach in there and grab it with. Go ahead and thread our little setup on. Go ahead and thread our little setup on. You don't need it to be tight. In fact, you may not want it to be tight, because then good luck getting it back on. Perfect, right? So I drew a little chart of how the pinion washers go. So this washer, I don't think you're going to be able to tell in the video, but see it in a ring? See how it looks on the outside? The inside of this thing kind of has a taper to it. It goes like so. So on my little chart here, you can see which way that taper goes. That one goes down. No difference on the thrust washer. That goes there. And the next one doesn't have any tapers on the inner, but it has it on the outer, which you might be able to kind of tell. Ever so slight. That's our top. Its taper needs to go that way. Like so. Then we're going to need the tilt pin off the engine, which is this guy, and we'll use that to install our pinion. Pinion parts by dipping them in my little tank. This may be a little tricky to get in, especially with the forward gear being in the way like that. So hopefully we can rock this thing back here. And right in. So now I can pull up on my yoke locator, push our little shifter cradle back into its spot, and our pinion in forward gear resting in there nicely. Now we can install our clutch dog. You really should use some long reach pliers for this. I have every specialty tool that you could think of for these outboards. For some reason I don't have some long reach pliers, but hopefully we can get it in there with this. It's going to be a little tricky. I rotate that shifter so it's facing me. We got our Sharpie marks there. I'm going to try to get those as centered as possible. Alright, our clutch dog is sitting in there pretty nicely. A little hard to tell, but it looks like I have a straight shot for the prop shaft to go in there. Now we need to get the detent balls back into place. So for that we're going to use some of this high-tack assembly lube theory. It's nice and sticky and it'll hold everything where it needs to go. I'm probably going to lose these a few times before this actually works. So there's one ball in there, the easy one. First one's always easiest. The second one, some more of this goop. Hope it holds it okay. Now, when I install it, I'm going to line those two balls up, which apparently this ain't sticking at all. Anyway, I'm going to line those two balls with those two little Sharpie marks that I made on the shifter, the clutch dog rather. Use the dab of each, or dab on each ball of this triple guard grease, just a hair, and it's holding it in there just fine. Now with the balls kind of held in place, we'll set it in there ever so carefully to not lose any balls. If we do, we're taking this whole thing apart again. Balls are where they need to go. Use a screwdriver to kind of hold that one into place. Now I need something that I can tap this in with. So the screwdriver may not have been a good idea. It's a little magnetic, and then it just kind of allowed my ball to roll on out of there. But it's also allowing the ball to go right back into there. So I don't know if anything's really lost there. So I'm pushing the ball in a little bit. The tooth on the clutch dog will guide the other side in, so let's give it a little tap. And we are back installed. And for the reverse gear, I'll just get some oil on it. Slide it into place, like so. For the bearing carrier, I still need to grease up the lip seal of the where the propeller shaft is going to be. Should be good. We're going to need to install some gasket sealing compound to the outer lip right here. And just for safe measure, I'll probably put some on the O-ring too. Now wipe off the excess and we'll go install this. Now I'm going to put some oil, Gearcase oil anyway, on the propeller shaft. I'll make sure it doesn't give me any problems. And I'll use my finger. Put some into the bearing, and just reinstall this. When I was taking one of these apart a while ago, I thought it said up right here. This one doesn't, so I went and checked out some of the other motors I have. They don't say up either, so I guess there is no correct way this should go. So it kind of goes in like so. I'll give it a little bit of tap to get it in. Now I'll get the screws and tighten it down. So I went ahead and wire wheeled the screws so they're nice and clean now. Now I usually use anti-seize on my bolts. Anybody watching this video probably won't want to spend additional money on anti-seize, and Evinrude recommends using their gasket sealing compound. And when I take these apart, that's what they had on them, and they come apart decent, you know, depending on the motor, but most of the time no issues. So I'll just be using that for the threads of the screw. Now, there are torque settings on these, which is 60 to 80 inch-pounds. So I'll get them started. My wrench here. And then switch over to my torque wrench. Now, does it really matter? Probably not, but I have a torque wrench, might as well do it right. So I have an owl here, AWL, owl, and we can use that to put in our pivot pin, and we jiggle our rod, or our cable, up and down a little bit, and it'll align where it needs to go. You can take it out and have a look, and we go straight down. Now, I've already cleaned up the pivot pin. I'm going to reuse the old one. Threads aren't that bad, and I'll probably never be taking this back out anyway. So in our kit, we have a O-ring We need to put some thread locker, as they recommend, onto the threads of the pivot pin here. I put way too much. Something I'm used to, I guess. Alright, we got a dab in there now. Clean it up with a little rag. And just kind of line her up. Now this has torque settings as well. They are 48 to 84 inch-pounds. Now to me, 48 to 84 seems like a huge gap, but that's what they say. And that'll do it. Alright, now we can remove our yoke locator tool. Now we just install our drive shaft. Do this to rotate everything inside, make sure it all engages. Which, we're in there, turning nicely. Now I'll install the shift rod. I went ahead and cleaned this up on the wire wheel. Looks not too bad. We need to install some triple guard grease to the threads here. I'm assuming they want this done to make sure that that never seizes or locks in there, or perhaps as it slides into the shift rod bushing, it greases it up a little bit more too. It's my assumption anyway. Could be wrong. But stick it back inside the hole. So to adjust this properly, the distance between the flat spot of the gear case and the top of this, so the highest point, this guy, needs between 11/32 seconds and 7/16 of an inch. So I'm going to grab my calipers and we're going to make sure that's adjusted correctly. So what I'm going to try to do is 27/64. I figure that right in the middle between the 13/30 seconds and the 7/16. So it looks like if I go up one more turn, or down one more turn. Wrong way. Alright, what am I doing? So, looks like that would do it right about there. 27/64. I'll get something to put across the top to make sure my measurement's okay. Yeah, pretty accurate. So it's all the way down, and then back one turn gave me that perfectly. So one thing you'll notice when you get the Evinrude kit, or if you decide to get an Evinrude kit, it's going to come with different screws. This is the original flathead type. This has a little Allen. Personally, I like the Allen type better. Maybe a little harder to find a tool to get in there than a flathead, but flatheads I've never really cared for. These seem to strip out a little less. So I'm going to be putting these in right now. Just kind of finger tighten them in there. Reason I'm doing this now instead of later, I'm going to go sand and paint this thing. And if you see here, some of the oil from the parts we installed is already dripping out. That can't be happening when I get some paint on there. So I'm going to put these in, paint them on, take them back off, fill the gear case with oil later. I'm not going to make a video of me painting this. All I'm going to be doing is slightly sanding it, primering it, and then painting it. No reason to really make a video of you watching me do that. It would just bore you, nobody would watch it anyway. So that is pretty much the end of rebuilding the gear case. Next video I'll be installing the water pump and this back onto the engine, so stay tuned for that one. So I have two bonus parts in our kit. So before I go, I figured I should probably mention that. The big guy here, that is a seal, impeller housing to exhaust housing. So when we do the water pump, probably be using that one. And the smaller one is the seal for the impeller housing to drive shaft. So again, these are two water pump parts. We're not quite ready for that, so we won't be using them. So if you got any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. And have a good one.